A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke chapter 16, verses 19 to 31. Passage taken from the Message version of the Bible. There once was a rich man, extensively dressed in the latest fashions, wasting his days in conspicuous consumption. A poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, had been dumped on his doorstep. All he lived for was to get a meal from scraps of the rich man's table. His best friends were the dogs who came and licked his sores. Then he died, this poor man, and was taken up by the angels to the lap of Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. In hell and in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham in the distance and Lazarus in his lap. He called out, "Father Abraham, mercy, have mercy. Send Lazarus to dip his finger in water to cool my tongue. I am in agony in this fire." But Abraham said, "Child, remember that in your lifetime you got the good things and Lazarus the bad things. It's not like that here. Here he is consoled and you are tormented. Besides, in all these matters there is a huge chasm set between us, so that no one can go from us to you even if he wanted to, nor can anyone cross over from you to us." The rich man said, "Then let me ask you, Father, send him to the house of my father where I have 5 brothers, so he can tell them the score and warn them so they won't end up here in this place of torment." Abraham answered, "They have Moses and the prophets to tell them the score. Let them listen to them." "I know, Father Abraham," he said, "but they are not listening. If someone came back to them from the dead, they would change their ways." Abraham replied, "If they won't listen to Moses and the prophets, they are not going to be convinced by someone who rises from the dead." The Gospel of the Lord. Reflections on the Gospel according to Luke chapter 16, verses 19 to 31. Pope Francis, commenting on this Gospel, says, "Excluding Lazarus, the rich man has not taken into account the Lord or his commandments, because to ignore the poor is to despise God. Lazarus represents well the silent cry of the poor of all times and the contradiction of a world in which immense riches and resources are in the hands of a few. The rich will be condemned not for their riches, but for having been unable to feel compassion for the Lazaruses and to help them. God's mercy is linked to our mercy towards our neighbor. When we ignore the poor at our doorstep, mercy of God too does not find space in our closed heart. God's mercy cannot enter there. If I do not open the door of my heart to the poor, that door also remains closed for God, and this is terrible. Remember the Magnificat of Mary? He cast the mighty from their throne, and he lifted up the lowly. With this parable, Jesus teaches the essentials of compassion and the danger of riches that closes the eyes and heart towards the needs of our brothers and sisters. The season of Lent reminds us that this is the right time to convert and to look for the Lazaruses who await us, for they are in need of a helping hand. Beware of the indifferences that closes the heart to such situations of poverty and marginality. Be careful not to close the door of our hearts to the much sufferings of others, because the only credential before God will be our works of mercy with the poor. Well, learning to look at the poor from their poverty, the sick from their illnesses, and the marginalized from their marginalization is the goal of a well understood charity. Let me leave you with two thoughts from Saint Basil the Great. The poor is not the one who has no wealth, but the one who refuses to share his wealth. Saint Basil says, he was so poor that he only had money. The second thought, the food and clothing that you do not need today does not belong to you. So Saint Basil says, to the hungry belongs the bread that you withhold, to naked man the jacket you guard, jealous in your treasure box.